Welcome to another Southern Gals Kitchen show. We really have something special today. Fall is just a wink and a nod away, and around here that means apple dumpling time. Sit back, get your pen and paper, take note. If you haven't made Old Fashion Apple Dumplings, you're in for a treat. We are going to start with our flour. You know, apple dumplings are like pie crust, but this is a little different recipe. Now, people make apple dumplings with bought pie crust. I don't like bought pie crust really. But you can make them if that's what you want to do. You just follow the process. They make them with the flaky dough. Some people use what they call a rough puff, and I have used rough puff. But this is kind of my version of rough puff plus, really. It's my apple dough dumpling. I don't really use this for too much else. Sometimes for a tart. But rough puff, which is a all butter kind of flaky kind of crust, could be used. And a lot of people do use it. This just is like rough puff, but it has some extra ingredient, which is butter flavored shortening on top of the butter. So this is going to use 300 grams of all-purpose flour. It's going to use a teaspoon of salt, just regular salt. It's going to use 8 tablespoons of butter flavored shortening and 2 sticks of butter. It has a lot of fat in it, but the butter and the shortening, but that's what makes it flaky and tender and puff up in the oven. Now, you know the puffing up in the oven, though, has more to do with your everything being cold before you put it in the oven. And when I make apple dumplings, because you roll, I'll show you later, but you fold the dough around one apple at a time. So I'll take my pan, I'll put that apple dumpling in my pan, I'll set it in the refrigerator covered. And then I'll do another one and do another one till I get 4 or 6 or whatever I'm making in there. So I want to keep those really cold, because that cold, if that butter melts, you'll just have greasy, soggy kind of crust. It won't be so good. But when everything's really cold, that butter coated in flour, and I'm going to show you how to do that, just sort of makes little steam pockets and it puffs that crust up. That's what you want. Flour, if you just dip, kind of heavy dip and level off with a knife, you're probably going to get too much flour. A better method when you're doing pie crust or pie dough or apple dumpling dough, as we're doing today, is I like a scale, but if you don't use a scale, I'm going to show you something you can do. I've got my scale on. I'm going to tear it down to 0. That makes it, the bowl's already on there. It was on 0. You put your container on, then you go back to 0. But we want 300 grams. So if you'll take your flour, just kind of fluff it up. This bowl's pretty full. It's kind of hard to do. But you just kind of shuffle it into your spoon. And you're going to do, with this method, if you don't have a scale, I'll show you about what this weighs out to. This should be very close to 300. I like a scale. I recommend it. I don't make any money off selling scales. But I highly recommend it. They don't cost that much. Get them at any supermarket around anywhere anymore. And you don't need a $80 scale. Mine was about $20, I think. And I've had it for years. Well, a couple of years, I guess. So they'll last a long time. You don't need anything super duper fancy. Just a good scale. There's 2. Put that over there. Now we need a half. We are up to almost 250. Let's see what this half does. Should be close to our 300. This is the best method to do it as opposed to the other. 301. It's perfect. So if you don't have scale and you don't want to invest in one, I would, for bread making and everything, I just can't beat it. Then use that method of doing the flour, okay? So let me set my scale aside, out of the way. So we have our flour, and I bought this plate. It's kind of a plate with a lip on it. You see that lip? I love this to make pie dough and things in. They sell something called a kneading tray. A kneading tray can be expensive. You don't need a kneading tray. All you need is cut there. All you need is a tray with a lip on it. And You'll be just fine. This is to, you want kind of a lot of surface when you're working this pie dough. You can do it on your counter too. I used to do it on my counter, but I really like this tray. Cost $5, I think. It's pretty inexpensive. Okay, and what we're going to do first, I have 8 tablespoons of shortening, already measured out. Butter flavored shortening. I'm just going to put it in the bowl. Pretty simple so far, huh? This is really a simple pie dough to make. There's nothing hard about it. It's just a little tricky in that it's really soft. I'm going to open my butter because everything's cold, and it's really best to go ahead and cut up your butter, put it in the bowl, and keep it in the refrigerator till you get ready to use it. But for filming, I didn't do that, so we have our butter here. I'm going to open it up and have it ready. And when you mix this up, your shortening and your butter, you can always, and I do this a lot, I'll mix up my shortening and my butter, and I'll stick the whole thing back in the refrigerator, sometimes just in a Ziploc bag or so, and just stick it back in the refrigerator, because you want everything really, really cold at every stage of the game. If your kitchen's warm, you want to start with this bowl and this flour and everything refrigerated, and then every time you think it's getting too soft, just stick the whole thing in the refrigerator. You can't over refrigerate it. It's not going to hurt a thing. Okay, we're going to mix this up just slightly. Fingers, thumbs. Don't squeeze. Don't use your hand. You'll overdo it. This shortening was cold. The butter's cold. The flour is cold. And you just squish with your fingers, and you're just kind of mixing this up roughly. You're not doing anything fancy. Just toss it around, mix it roughly. And what you're doing, the butter and the shortening, the butter and the flour, shortening and the flour, I can't talk. You can get it into a little smaller pieces than you can when we add the butter. When we add the butter, we want to keep it in sort of the size of walnuts, half walnut halves, because you don't want to overdo it, and you don't want to overdo this, but you want everything coated in flour, and that's kind of your goal. And I'm going to show you something here. We're going to dump this out, make it a little easier for you to see. Clean my hands off a little bit. We're going to now add about 2 tablespoons of water to our flour, butter, and shortening mixture. You just put in enough to make your dough wet and stick together. You can always add more, but you can't take it away. And then you'll just mix that in, and you'll start mixing it, and you'll see it will start holding together. And again, you just gently kind of push it together, and if you need more water, you can add it. If you need less, you can add it. But don't put too much in at first thinking you need more, because you may not. It's going to be a loose, really loose kind of dough. You'll start mashing it together. This could use just a little bit more. Let me get just a little bit more in here. Depends on flour. There's a lot of conditions that can affect your flour. So we'll just put a little more in there and mix that in. And just work it until it holds together, and it will. You don't want big clumps of flour either left on your tray. You really do want it mixed up well. You'll see that it's starting to hold together. It's starting to hold its shape, and that's what you want. But you don't want any big, huge pieces of butter or any big pieces of flour. You want them well mixed with your thumbs, your fingers and your thumbs. But when the dough starts coming together like it is, then it's pretty much ready. You can see I've got no dry pockets in here. If I see one, I'll mash it back in there. But I'm ready to put this together. We're going to shape it, and then we're going to put this in the refrigerator in a piece of saran wrap and let it get cold, at least for a few more hours before we're actually going to use it. Maybe an hour, 30 minutes, something like that. It's paper too, I think I mentioned that, but parchment is actually what I do use. And I'm going to set this over here. And what I'm going to do with this, scoot it around, it's like I said, it's holding together. What you want to do to make these nice flaky air pockets is just pull that over and press. Just press. Don't push real hard, but press enough that that dough, those layers start making airy layers in there. And you just fold it over and press. And I'm going to turn it around. You see any bigger pieces of butter, kind of get those worked down. You don't really want big chunks of butter in there either. And I see a couple, so I'm going to get rid of them. This will help get rid of them too. So you can fold over and you just press. And you want to do that 3 or 4 times. So we're going to fold over, fold it this way, and press. This really makes a flaky dough. If you want to make really, I'd say, award-winning apple dumplings, this is the way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do them, but this is my favorite. The dough's a little tricky, like I said, but it is well worth the effort to use it. So press down, like I said, 3 or 4 times, so it's probably good enough. So we've got it in pretty good shape. I see some butter there. I'd like to mash out a little bit more. Okay. This should be ready now to go in our wax pipe, not plastic wrap. And then we're going to refrigerate it. I'm going to turn this up, get it kind of in a smaller piece here, pressed together. And then we'll move it over to our plastic wrap. And then we can wrap it up and refrigerate it. It's still soft, and that's why you want to refrigerate it. You're going to have to keep it cold to keep that butter from melting on you. You don't want that butter too soft. I have kept this in the refrigerator overnight. Then you just have to set it out just a little bit, and it's going to be a little too firm, but you can set it out just a very short time, and it's going to be okay. That's all there is to it, folks. There's your apple dumpling dough. Refrigerator, and it's getting cold. Like I said, 30 minutes to an hour. That was a double crust. A double crust should make 12 sort of medium-sized apples. This one's a little bigger than most of mine. We're going to peel and core the apples before then we're going to, apple dumplings, you peel and core them, then you wrap some crust up around the apple. You fill the center with some sugar, cinnamon, and butter. How good does that get? And then you have a syrup that goes on, a hot syrup. We'll just take it step at a time. But the first thing you do, I make my crust, or you can make it the day before. But you're going to have to peel and core these apples. And I'm going to show you how to do that. I've got most of them already done. If you can see that core, it goes all the way through. You feel in there, there should be no rough spots. I feel a rough spot. I missed one. We're going to get that out of there. You have to get that out because that rough spot is part of the core. And you don't want to eat that. You want that out. You just want to check them. Check them a couple of times maybe and make sure all that's out. I still see a little tiny piece. I'll take the end of my knife, sharp knife, and just kind of dig it out. That way it's gone. See that rough? You don't want that. It needs to be smooth in there. Okay. I'll dry my hands because I need to start. I'm working with a sharp knife. I want dry hands so it doesn't slip. So you're just going to peel your apple just like you peel an apple. Doesn't take too long to peel them. Make apple pie, you probably have peeled a lot of them. The coring is what I'm going to show you though, that you just need to be careful. You're working with a sharp knife, so you don't want to cut yourself. And there's just a couple of little things. Mainly it's just taking your time. I'm doing a double batch today, so I'm actually making 12. So just this is a Saturday, this is weekend baking. Fall of the year and the winter when you can't maybe get out as much as you want, or it's a rainy day or whatever. This is a good little project to take on. The rewards are some amazing eats. Amazing eats. If you've never had good apple dumplings, you're in for a real treat because they are just so good. They're so worth the trouble. I wouldn't want to make them every weekend, but it's okay once in a while. I'm making these mainly to take to my son's house with his family. And then I have a friend coming over later, and she's going to help us test these. We're going to test one for you. Okay, I've got it peeled. Now this is the part, get you a little sharp knife. It needs to be sharp. And you're just going to kind of work around that core. You can't just dig in there and get it out all at once. It's not going to work. You'll break your apple and all kinds of stuff. You just kind of slide in and out. Come picking up, slide back in, Pick up, slide in. That doesn't get all the core out, it gets some of it out. Then we're going to do the other end the same way. Peeling there. We're just going to core around with our knife. Kind of work around there. Work in, not too far in, because you'll break your apple if you're not careful. I've done it, I know. So you get that core out. Now, there's still, you can't see through there, obviously. This is the part, I'll do it on here. I think you can see it better. Hopefully that will work better. You take your knife then, and you just stick it down in there and just kind of dig and scrape. You're really just scraping. Keep your hand away from this end, you'll cut your hand. Keep it on the side. Scrape, 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 and just go around. Gently scrape. Again, you don't want to break that apple. You just want to core it. So you can't put too much pressure. It's best to go slowly and go around a couple of times than to try to force it all at one time and then break your apples. If you break it, you could probably piece it together with your pie dough to hold it, but it's going to be much harder and it'll probably crack open on you. Noses too. Okay. So just scrape, scrape, scrape. Keep your hand away from the end. See that knife coming through. Scrape and scrape. Then when you can sort of see in there, you can see if there's any core. I can take the end of my knife just very gently, sort of dig out that core. Keep your hand away from the end, and I can dig a little bit. I see a seed still in there. Some apples come out, the cores are pretty easy, and some of them it's much tougher. But you just want to scrape. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Now I do have a longer knife here sometimes I use. This one's very sharp too. Definitely keep your hand away. And I'll scrape with it. Just scrape. And turn your apple and scrape. Turn the apple and scrape. That's all there is to it really. It'll take but about a minute to do one. And it's not like it's going to take you all day. It's not. Okay, that looks pretty clean. Then you feel of it with your finger. You look at it and you feel. If there's any rough places, like there's one, you want to scrape that down some more. And this part of that knife works really well for that scraping. Scrape. So we take one of our pieces here. Like I said, we divide them into 6. Lightly flour your board. Have a ruler, because you're going to need it. And also, your apples are already cored. You're going to use this sugar cinnamon mixture, and I'll tell you what this is. For 6, get my notes. For 6, this is 1/2 cup of sugar, and I use the brown sugar blend, which is part sugar and part alternative. You can use cane sugar, you can use whatever you want. 1/2 cup of sugar, 1 1/2 teaspoons of cinnamon, and 1 tablespoon of butter. Your butter's separate. Just mix your sugar and cinnamon together, and the butter you're going to use it to pat on. And then the other thing we have here, we're going to pour this, once we get our apple dumplings folded with our dough, put in our bowl, we pour this around the bottom. You don't pour it on them, just around the bottom. So this has already been brought to a boil and cooled. Just bring it to a boil, don't cook it. Just bring it to a boil and then take it off the heat. But for 6 apples, it's 1 cup of sugar, 2 cups of water, 3 tablespoons of butter. It's only brown because I used a brown sugar blend. You can use brown sugar if you want to. And we're going to roll this out. And I've got a little water here to moisten my hands. Any scrap dough pieces, like I said, save them. You can use them for other little pie projects. I keep all my scraps. You never throw them out. You put too much work into making this to throw them out. This probably could be a little colder, but I'm going to go ahead and try to work with it with you. That other's going to have to sit in the refrigerator a little more. I'm going to kind of move this over here just to get it out of my way a little bit while I'm rolling. Okay, each one of these squares to wrap your apples should be 7 by 7. So start with a square shape so you can roll a square shape. Dust your rolling pin. I've been rolling some out here. You can see I've got quite a mess of flour. But that's what you do when you make pie dough. Start in the center, gently press and roll out. Don't push hard, just press. Roll back. Don't roll back and forth. Start in the center and roll back. Start in the center and roll out. Center and roll back. Center and roll out. You want to move your dough around. You don't want it to stick. And you're going to get it 7 by 7. So we're already up to 6 inches. We just need another inch on that. So we're going to get the sides rolled out. Roll up, start in the middle, roll back. Roll up, start in the middle, roll back. Roll up, start in the middle, roll back. Turn your dough. You want to make sure it's not sticking, because you get that apple on there and your dough stuck to your board, you're not ever going to get it in your pan. I did spray my pan with some cooking spray too, just to make sure they don't stick and they're easy to get out. Keep this in as much of a square as you can. It's just going to make it easier when you're rolling it out. You see it's pretty misshapen there. Kind of shape it back up as well as you can. Okay, we're 5 inches there, but 6 there. You can see where that corner is a little short, so I'm going to use my hand and just push that down a little bit. Get that corner evened up a little bit more. Use my ruler and mash it down. Okay, now we're 6, probably 6 and 5.5 it looks like. So we need to roll a little more. Hands. You don't want too much flour in there. You don't want it tasting floury. Roll gently. Don't let your dough split. Just put it back together. You can work with your dough. Roll gently. Keep those edges as straight as you can. Roll gently. Put in the middle. Roll gently. Now it's probably getting closer to 7 and 7. It's actually 8, so there's 7 right there. So I'm going to lay that straight across, and I'm going to take that off. That's a scrap. Scrap I'm going to keep. So now it's 7, 7. I'm going to straighten this edge up. A little bit of scrap there. Straighten this up. 7. Not quite 7, so we're going to roll this a little bit more this way. Just ever so gently. Now that should be 7 by 7 there. Perfect. 7 by 7. Straighten up your edges. Just work with your dough. This kitchen's warm because I've preheated my oven to 425, and I got 4 apple dumplings in there baking. You bake them 40 to 45 minutes at 425, but it makes the kitchen warmer with the oven on, obviously, and that's why this dough is just a little bit soft. It gets soft really fast. Okay, scraps go in my scrap bag. I make little mini pies, like I said, or if I need some scrap dough sometime, or I need to, you can save enough of those, you can make a pie. Okay, this can be picked up. That did tear it a little bit, but that's all right. It can be picked up. That's stuck. So this kitchen is really warm. I can really tell it's making it a little difficult. But we're going to fix it. It's all fixable. Just a little flour in my hand will take care of that. Okay, our apples, you know, we had ready. Put it in the center. Take your sugar mixture and you fill the center. And I made a double, like I said, I made a double batch, so I have plenty here. Take your butter, put your pat of butter, and the butter's really soft because it's been sitting out, but that's okay. It's gonna go in the oven anyway, isn't it? It's not like part of your pie crust. Put that right on top. Now you're gonna moisten the edges of this, just barely, because this dough's pretty wet. I don't want to get it too wet. But you want to seal your edges. And this is where if you have your doughs giving you trouble, just piece it together. It's okay. You want to pull up each triangle and it'll fit right over the top. If you did that 7 by 7, I'll use my ruler and kind of get that up. Fold in your sides and just pull your piece up. Fold in your little sides there, and then pull your rectangle up. It'll fit right up there, and then you can just use your hands to flatten it out. Now I'm going to wet both hands, just barely, because this is really soft. But I want to kind of seal these edges in so that sugar, cinnamon, stays in that apple. You are going to pour your liquid around it, which is your sugar, cinnamon, and butter that you boiled and cooled. It will go around it. We're going to piece this. I'm going to put 1 thumb of flour just to make sure it stays in there good. It's really soft. Like I said, my kitchen's too warm. Put that in there. You put in this pan, last bowl, will hold 6. You don't really want them touching. You want to have room in between. I got a lot of mess here to clean up, don't I? So we'll put this, when I get 6 more in there, I'll just pour this on the bottom. Not on them, but just on the bottom. And again, that's your sugar, cinnamon, and your butter that you boiled and cooled. It doesn't have to be real cool, but mine's been sitting a while, so it's cooled. I'm going to go ahead and make off the last 6. Actually, I'm making 4 more of these because I'm making 10. And we'll come back and taste them when they get done. We're going to bake them 425 oven, preheated, 40 to 45 minutes, or you can stick a fork in there and make sure it's really, really tender. See in a little bit. Look, I'm going to move this. It's still a little warm. I'm just going to move the whole board out of the way. Got a little stuff on the cabinet here. And we're going to taste these because they've been out of the oven longer. I didn't want to eat hot apple dumplings because that syrup will burn your tongue. So I took a little bite on this one, so that's going to be mine. I wanted to make sure the crust was done.
You mean I'm going to get a whole one?
You're going to get a whole one. You're going to get a whole one. This is going to be supper and then some. This doesn't ruin your supper, nothing will. I like a little more syrup on mine. You know, apple dumplings, you create memories with them. I told my son I was making them, and I asked my daughter if they remembered me making them when they were kids, and they said they did. And then I made my son that big pan today. But it's like having your own little, not little, but pretty big piece of apple pie. You want that juice again on there, because that's the good part. That's the yummy stuff. I'll set this out of the way a little bit. Well, you got a spoon there.
I guess there's no calories in these at all.
No calories. I took them all out. Did you just remember I said that low sugar? I want to tell you about that sugar blend, and I won't mention any brand names. But I have found a few times, including with this, that stuff really is sweet. This particular brand says use less, and I believe you really need to. But the recipe I gave you was for using regular sugar anyway. Got ice cream on there. They're best served with ice cream. So we're going to serve it with ice cream. That's kind of the normal. You know, apple dumplings go back hundreds and hundreds of years. The Europeans, when they came over, when the Europeans came over and the Pilgrims, they brought with them apple seeds, apple cuttings, apple plants. And that's how we really got them started in this country. And they made pie crust or dough-like things with meat in them, and then later they transitioned to fruit. And, of course, they're all over the country now. I mean, this is the South. You'll see so many recipes for apple dumplings. You'll see them in restaurants. You'll see them in cookbooks. It's a real Southern thing for sure. And one of my favorite, really, desserts, because I'm a big apple pie person. Okay, Judy, we'll let you try some and see if you think it's any good. Take a bite. It has cooled, like I said. You don't want to eat this hot. I mean, like right out of the oven. You'll just burn your tongue with that hot syrup. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. This is the best I've ever eaten.
Nothing like homemade apple dumplings. I've eaten them otherwise, but they really don't compare. And you know, I'm a big fan of doing your own crust. The crust is flaky from that butter and shortening. It's tender. You can taste that cinnamon, those apples. They're just perfectly cooked.
Wow.
Wow's on, say too.
Light.
It is really good. Now you can see this crust. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's just very flaky. And you won't get that out of a box. It's kind of like a, well, not exactly a puff pastry, but it's really, really flaky and tender. And I showed you how we rolled that out and how we did it. Make your crust up ahead of time. It's best to have it in the refrigerator overnight or freeze it and thaw it out later, because the apple dumplings themselves take time. And I showed you how to core them out with a knife. There is an apple core you can buy. I may get one, but you can core that apple out. Maybe a little bit easier, but it doesn't take too long to do it by hand. Good sharp knife will do it. Just don't want to cut your hand, like I said. Be careful with that. But we're going to enjoy our apple dumplings. What you say, Judy?
It is honestly, for sure, the best I've ever had. I don't know. I got to have the recipe. Better yet, I got a person to make it.
No, because they just want somebody to make it for you.
That's it.
It does take a little bit of time.
Wonderful.
A little bit of time.
Wonderful.
Well, we hope y'all enjoyed this episode on apple dumplings. And I hope you'll try them and let me know what you think.